If you really want to get to the heart of America and the heart of a community, look at a local election. And local elections, because we live in community with each other. And what I do matters to the people who live in my community, and what they do matter to me. And so I think what gives me hope is that there are more and more good people who are willing to invest in building a community that is truly living up to the ideals of our American spirit.
It's important to be part of a union because you have to have a voice.
Welcome to Union Talk. I'm Randi Weingarten.
Welcome, everyone, to Union Talk. And we are now getting to the end of the 2023 year. So I want to wish everyone a happy holiday, whether you celebrate any of the holidays. I hope that the light shines brighter than the darkness, and that the coming year is one where the light will shine brighter than the darkness. And for us in education, the November election, which was about a month ago, was just that. The light shined brighter than the darkness. And this is what I mean by that. What we saw in these elections, which some people, the pundits, call off-year elections, but for us, they are pretty much intense on-year elections. But they are local elections, school board, local office holders, state and local bodies like in Virginia or in New Jersey. But these are elections where people went out to vote and voted for humanity and voted for people who believed in other human beings and voted for pro-public education candidates when they were on the ballot. And frankly, what we've seen in our public schools throughout the country is that there's been real stress and strain, punctuated and made worse by the aftermath of COVID. But over the course of the last few years, as teachers and pro-public education school board members and school superintendents who believe in all kids' ability to learn, as we've actually done our work despite the obstacles, parents have said, we're with you. We need you to do this work for our kids. We need our kids to have the freedom to learn. We need our kids to connect purpose and passion. We need our schools to be safe and welcoming environments that are really well-rounded. And yes, there's been, and our guest here is going to talk about this a little bit, there's been a small group of powerful and well-funded extremists and lobbyists who focused on book bans and censorship and dehumanization and tried to divide and to privatize. But what we saw in 2023 was that the message that resonated was one that said, let's help our kids thrive. Let's create real solutions for kids and communities. And in fact, an AFT analysis of 250 races throughout the country where the far right invested resources in trying to have anti-public education candidates win, we found that 80% of the time, the pro-public education, the AFT and other pro-public education forces that were behind these candidates, we won 80% of the time. And what we also saw was that the far right 1776 PAC and Moms for Liberty PAC, they lost over 70% of the time. So there's a lot of groups that are part of this pro-public education work. And we're basically a lot of groups on the ground, Moms Rising, Red, Wine, and Blue, Parents Together. But at the end of the day, it really does come back to the candidates that were running for school board. And that voting really does matter. And the work that we do on the ground really matter. and pluralism really matters, and nurturing our democracy really matters, and standing up for our rights and voting really matters. And so one of the people who has been through this is someone who's an AFT member, but somebody who's also a school board member, Virginia Mancini, who won her second election to the St. Louis Park School Board in Minnesota. And so, Virginia, you wear lots of different hats, and I'm so glad you're with us. And I know you're in school, and I know a bell is going to ring pretty soon.
I just did.
But thank you for doing double, triple duty. And so, welcome to Union Talk.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to talk about this topic.
Fantastic. So, in Minnesota, we actually saw not an 80% win rate, but pretty much 85 to 90% win rate. But you have been through a lot in the last few years. Could you actually talk about what was happening in your school board, in the St. Louis Park School Board in Minnesota over the course of the last couple of years? And then why you decided to run in the first place? What's been happening there? And why did you decide to run again?
Well, I think that both of those questions are connected. So what is happening in St. Louis Park and why I decided to run are connected, but I think also what is going on with education and how current events have impacted me as a teacher also influenced why I was running. St. Louis Park is a really special community. In 2019, they passed their strategic plan for racial equity transformation. So as a school district, they are centering racial transformation, like racial equity transformation. And they have made inclusive, welcoming and inclusive environments for all students central to all decision makers. As an educator in the classroom, I'm still a middle school. I teach middle school English. I teach 7th grade English. Shout out to all my EL peeps. The impact that I saw happening wasn't the same. There was challenges to not only the books that I was teaching, but challenges to having programs like the Black Student Union, having challenges to gender sexuality alliance groups and things like that. And I saw, I have a daughter in St. Louis Park schools. And I thought how special and how wonderful St. Louis Park schools are. And I want to be a part of that. I want to make sure that we always have a pro-education board and that we have a board who's going to protect and grow our strategic plan for racial equity transformation. And I'm also deeply concerned about what's going on in our profession. People are not going into undergrad for education like they were 25 years ago when I was a teacher. We have a mass exodus of early career educators, and it bothers me. It bothers me that I think that teaching is, for me, it's more than a job. It's a sense of purpose and it's a lifestyle, and I love it. And it made me sad that so many people are leaving the profession. And so I guess my decision to run was twofold. Number one, I wanted to make sure what had happened to me as an educator didn't happen to teachers in St. Louis Park, so that we had a school board that supported equity work, that supported inclusivity, but that we also had a board who understand the realities of what it's like to be a teacher in today's times and how burnout. Oh, there's the bell again.
Love that.
Sorry.
No, this is like real life, and this is being in a school, and it's amazing that you're doing double and triple duty.
Absolutely. And just to that end, a lot of us are doing double and triple duties. And, there was a substitute teacher shortage for so long that many of us are during our prep periods, we're covering for our colleagues. And also just like, what does it mean to be burnt out? And if the number one reason, and I thought this was really interesting, we've done a lot of research into why teachers are burning out or why they are leaving the profession. And a lot of them are saying that it's from a lack of support, more than it was connected to salary and things like that. Although I think that a lot of kids don't go into education because of the college debt that they carry. And so I asked myself as an educator, like, what does it mean to be supported? Like, what does that look like? And what does it look like if I can give back to my community, not only my community where I live, but also my professional community? What does it look like to be supportive of teachers? And that's why I ran, because I have a certain capacity. I've been able in my career, thanks to my union, develop professional standards and professionalism and some capacity as far as leadership goes, that I felt that I could do it. And so those are sort of, I hope I answered your question. Those are sort of the two reasons why I ran, and kind of what I saw going on in the 2023 election, actually, and the 2022 election.
So I think there's a lot to unpack in all of what you said. So there's a ton of questions that I want to ask you in terms of follow-up, because you're in two incredibly important positions. One, classroom teacher in a school in your own district, and two, school board member in your beloved district. Excuse my voice. So let me take the second for a minute first and kind of end with the first, which is, so as a school board member, what did you see in the last couple of years, both locally as well as nationally, in terms of the extremism coming at us? And then how were you able to deal with it in terms of the local district? Like, you talked about, for example, the issues around inclusivity and equity and seeing kids as who they are and seeing families as who they are, and really embracing and the differences, and the differences in some ways making us strongly, but really seeing and respecting lived experience. That's completely antithetical to what Moms for Liberty and 1776 Project and all of them were doing. So how were you able to navigate that, and navigate that successfully?
I think that I go back to like my first or second year of teaching. One of my mentors or administrators at some point said to me, what parents really want to know is that you care for their kids and that there's hope. And he said that to me before walking into one of my first parent teacher conferences. And I have carried that with me my entire career. And I think that especially the door knocking that I did, and when I talked with parents, or even just community members for that matter, you don't have to have kids in the district to care about children. They wanted to know that I cared, and they wanted to know that there's hope. And so navigating, having that as my premise in all of the discussions that I had with stakeholders, I think is helpful. Because I think what it does is it helps my constituents and the voters understand that I'm not in this for myself. I don't have an agenda. My agenda is children, because I think children deserve the very, very best that we have to offer them. And when they know that I care about kids, and that there's hope for us, and hope for our future, and hope for our community as well as our country, I think it turns it around. And it shifts the premise. I'm not entirely sure if I know how to answer the question of like how I battled the extremism. I think just by developing relationships, having conversations, responding to every single email with hey, can I give you a phone call and let's like have a conversation. I think a lot of times people jump to a conclusion based on really incomplete or negligent facts. And they see something on social media and they immediately believe that this could possibly be true. And by developing those relationships and having conversations with people, with the precept of I care about kids and I care about my profession and I care about our community, which is why I'm doing this, it really helped. And just something that you had said earlier that really resonated with me is the 80% pro-education one, and I think it was slightly higher in Minnesota. One of the things that struck me so much when I was door knocking and meeting with student groups and out there in different community connections, how supportive in general people are of educators. Like they know how hard it is to be. I feel like just in the previous conversation I was having, I teach seventh graders, and the first thing people say to me as a seventh grade teacher is, "God bless you." Like, how do you do that? Like teaching seventh graders is so hard. So I think that in general, people really are supportive of educators and teachers. And then if you can center people and center the humanity of both of our students and our educators, and understand that that's the center and the core of our decision making, all that other stuff is not really as important. And so you can start in having good conversations. If I started with curriculum, and if I just wanted to talk about curriculum, I could see how walls would go up and nobody would want to talk to me. But instead we talk about, our lived experiences as people and as humans. And I think that really brought us all together.
So I think I just want to punctuate the point that you just said, which is, something that one of my mentors before I started teaching high school, gave me some advice, which in my own words went something like this. He said it in a different way than I'm saying it, but I've never forgotten it. And I used it from the first day of teaching, which was in 1990 or 1991 till now, which is we meet kids where they are and hopefully bring them to a different place. But if we don't meet them where they are, we're never going to meet them. And then the second thing is, it's not what's said, it's what's heard. And part of that is the way in which we say things and how we create an environment that is deeply human and deeply respectful. And I just heard that so what I heard was that this kind of work that we as educators do, which is to deeply respect our kids and our communities, is what actually brings people together. And that the reservoir is there for education. And part of it is getting through the noise and getting through a lot of very overt division and not going down those rabbit holes, which is what I hear you saying. Yeah. And it takes a person who is really exquisite to be able to do that, because these rabbit holes are hard. And so how do you deal with, like on a school board, how do you deal with a situation if somebody is yelling and screaming at you? And you're saying, I'm trying to get things done for kids. How do you do it?
Oh my goodness, Randi, I don't know. I don't know. I think it's helpful that I'm in.
See, this is why I like these podcasts, Virginia. It's just, how do we make it real?
Thank goodness I have seventh graders to come back to, because you can't walk into a seventh grade, or you can't walk into whatever classroom it is that gives the educator joy and not feel joy when your students come up to you. And I heard about somebody's cruise. I heard about somebody went to look at Christmas lights. I heard about a hockey game. I heard about a sledding incident. Well, it's in Minnesota right now. We don't have any snow for the first time ever. So lack of sledding.
That is shocking. That is shocking. It is December.
I know, it's really bizarre. And I think that helps me keep grounded, and that it's like I find the joy in that. And because they're so deeply human, like our students are so deeply human, and they experience so much. Like I remember when this is probably inappropriate for a podcast, so you might like it. You were supposed to laugh at it. Thank you for smiling.
I love it.
One of my first days of teaching middle school, because I taught high school before going to the middle school. And in the same day, I had a student come up to me needing to go to the nurse because he lost a tooth, and another student needing to go to the nurse because she got her period for the first time. That all happened in the same day.
Oh my God.
And it's like, we're just all so deeply human. And I think that that's what gives me joy and keeps me going on the school board, And I think when I'm listening to parents who are deeply concerned about something, I start with like, where is their concern coming from? Like, what is it? What is what is their humanity? What is their like understanding of that? And reminding myself that I have different lived experiences, that we all have different lived experiences. And that if we are going to, as you say, live in a pluralism, in a society that honors pluralism and honors everybody's unique voice and unique humanity and what we bring to our communities, then being on the school board is a good example of deep listening and listening to understand and asking questions and being vulnerable to not knowing the answer. And I think that that's a huge difference between um, what the board that I serve on is so wonderful. And as a team, we work together because all of us have such different lived experiences, and that we have that vulnerability to ask questions to better understand from their perspective what about a particular decision. So those are the things that help me to move forward. And I think that it helps me to be a better board member too. Like, I think just the ability to listen to other people's perspectives and understand how it's going to impact them. Like for sure, not all of the decisions that I have made as a school board member are, that some of the teachers or educators for St. Louis Park agree with. But I'm hoping that they understand where my decision making was coming from, because I'm trying to make that my thought process and my learning process as much as transparent as I can, so that I can develop that trust with not only my constituents, my community, but also with the educators that are in the building.
Well, there's a good data point here. You won a second term.
Yeah.
So that's a big message that people approve of the way in which you comported yourself on the board. But, it struck me, Virginia, and I love that you said that not for a podcast, everything's for this podcast. And I know you have to go shortly, but but what you just did in these last few minutes, and I hope our listeners hear it, these are the people who run for school board, who are pro-public education, who work on our school boards throughout the country. There is a reason why school boards are led by people who live in the community and deeply respect our kids and deeply respect our teachers. And this is what makes school board governance work. And I think you are a living example for the importance of having actually different experiences, including school teaching on school boards, the basic humanity that comes out of every single word that you say, Virginia, is so amazing. It's just you've given me, I often talk about hope versus fear, and even these few minutes have given me a lot of hope. So I want to ask you two last questions before we have to go, which is, one is, and this is the one I'm going to ask you at the end, who was the teacher who had the biggest impact on you? So I'm going to give you a second to think about that. But I also want to ask you, what gives you hope in 2024? I often say that we're in a race between hope and fear. So what gives you hope?
I think what gives me hope is that there are more people who care about a community coming together than there are people who are trying to dismantle it. I think that local elections actually give me hope. I'll be honest with you, and it has taken me some time to convince my spouse of that, because he only sees elections at the macro level with the presidency and kind of what's going on in Washington. But if you really want to get to the heart of America and the heart of a community, look at a local election. And local elections, because we live in community with each other. And they're like, what I do matters to the people who live in my community, and what they do matter to me. And so I think what gives me hope is that there are more and more people who are willing to invest, good people who are willing to invest in building a community that is truly living up to the ideals of our American spirit. So that gives me hope. And like talking with people, the more you talk to people, the more you realize that there's a lot of beauty and wonder in this world. And that if we just silo ourselves behind our computer screens, or if we take a pseudonym so that we can post something really derogatory and dehumanizing and frankly like absolutely lies, that just builds, that just like takes apart a community. And so I think that people are just uninterested in that now, and that there's a real desire to get back to what it means to be in community with one another. So that gives me a lot of hope. Is it hard work? Yes. Do we need people to step up?
Yep.
Yes. I thank you for saying that I'm a good person. That makes me feel good. But I think there's a lot of good people out there, and running for school board is hard. I mean, it's like, I'm not going to pretend that it was easy. It was,
No.
It's not as hard as you would think, but it definitely takes some dedication in getting in there. But there's so many organizations who will help you. There are so many organizations out there we just need good voices to outweigh the loud and at times very wealthy voices that would, dehumanize us and strip public education of everything that is valuable. So yeah, that's what gives me hope. Local elections, who knew?
I love it. I love it. Local elections give hope, but frankly, I think that that's right. I used to teach an AP Gov course, and I'm still actually on leave from my teaching from New York City. So when I leave this job, I can go back to teaching. But in my AP Gov course, what we used to do experiential learning, and one of the projects we would do is I would ask our kids to work with local officials on a civics project, because local elections and local officials are where the rubber meets the road in terms of how people look at government, about whether government is effective or not. I love when people say, well, isn't President Obama responsible for the sanitation collection? No, that's local officials. Having a school light, having a red light, it's local officials. Making sure you have composting or a ice rink in Minnesota, that's local officials. So thank you for saying that about local elections mattering. I think we did a civics lesson on top of everything else today. So last question before you have to run, which is, who was the teacher who had the biggest impact on you?
Well,
I ask every guest this question.
I know, and I'm prepared for it. I will say this though: there are a lot of teachers who have made very positive differences on me, and I don't think that learning stops once you've graduated. So I even had teachers making impacts on me as an educator. But the teacher who probably put me on the path of this journey was Mr. Bill Myatt from Pleasant Valley High School in Bettendorf, Iowa. He knows this. I have had lots of shout outs to Mr. Myatt. But he really, he looked at me and he said to me, you want to make a difference and you want to change this world. And I said, yes. And he's like, why aren't you going to become a teacher? And I was like, I don't know. Why don't I become a teacher to change the world? And so that was literally that moment when I was like, yes, I want to be a teacher, because I think it's an opportunity to make a difference in this world and to help kids and help people and make people read literature that I love. Shout out to all the ELA teachers.
So, to the Mr. Myatts of the world, did I say his name right?
Yep.
Mr. Myatts of the world, to the Ms. Mancinis of the world, and to all the other teachers and educators that are out there right now, on behalf of Virginia and myself, I just want to say thank you to everything you do, every year and every minute you do it, because you are actually helping foster, nurture a next generation. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And to you, Virginia, congratulations on your reelection. And thank you for everything you do. And thank you for joining us on this podcast about elections 2023. Thanks very much, everybody, and have a wonderful, 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 wonderful holiday.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Really appreciate you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Union Talk. Remember to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast and tune in every other week for a new episode. Thank you, be safe, and be well.